Welcome to the Business Women Australia podcast show, the podcast that brings together industry leaders to discuss the latest trends, insights and strategies. So sit back and relax, let's get inspired by the amazing women who are shaping the future of professional women in Australia. Don't forget to like and subscribe.
So welcome to the Business Women Australia podcast show. I'm Lyn Hawkins and I'm streaming on the traditional lands of the Noongar Nation. I'd like to pay respects to elders past, present and emerging. We're streaming live across Meta, across LinkedIn and YouTube, but you will find us also on your favourite platforms on iTunes and Spotify. So you can catch up on our recordings also on the Business Women Australia website. I'm delighted today to have the fabulous Sonya Georgievski to the show. I think I got that right this time.
You did indeed.
I did. I'm going to pick her brains about solving the growth puzzle. This is sort of moving away from the chaos of day to day into a clear, focused growth strategy. Sonya is the founder and director of EOX Business Partners, and she's a deputy or fractional CEO. So she helps organisations unravel that complexity that holds leaders back from taking their business to the next level. I'm also very lucky that Sonya is one of our very esteemed advisory board members of Business Women Australia. And she certainly helped me, like a trusted co-pilot. She's been able to help me identify the priority pieces in the growth puzzle for Business Women Australia, to sit back and to reflect on the business rather than being caught up in the business. She's a seasoned business performance consultant. She has over 30 years in the corporate sector. And I've seen her sharp strategic mind and her ability to deliver impactful transformational results in action. She's also the proud mother of 3, including Prem twin boys. And her lived experience inspired her to co-found All About Prem's Bed Rest, Birth and Beyond, supporting thousands of families with preemie and sick babies. And she's dedicated over 15 years to not-for-profit sector, contributing to education and health initiatives. Sonya is a fierce advocate for psychological safety in the workplace, especially for women and minorities impacted by systemic bullying. And she holds an MBA from the University of Melbourne. She's an accredited project manager and she's certified in Lean Six Sigma. Outside work, Sonya enjoys the coastal living on the Bellarine Peninsula. She loves a good coffee. She enjoys a book, a read, and time with family, including her gorgeous dog. We both have our beautiful dogs. I've got mine sitting here beside me. Hopefully he doesn't bark. Sonya, that's an impressive career. And look, I'm really keen to dive in and really understand how you help CEOs turn their vision into results without burning out. But before we do, tell me about EOX Business Partners and Deputy CEO. You've founded this organisation. So tell us a little bit about your journey and how you came about doing this kind of work.
Yeah, thanks, Lyn. Thanks for the introduction. That really sounds quite impressive. And, we don't normally look at what we've achieved over our career. We tend to sort of look forward and not look back. But it's been I'm sort of now approaching nearly 60, so I've got quite a bit of experience in lots of different things. And, and I think I, like many people, I've heard before say, I fell into a career, many years ago. And for me, that career was in finance. I've made my way through different roles in finance and always working on creating environments where people are thriving, but also the business achieves its outcomes. So I've carved that. I've worked with different functions in businesses, and I find that what I do is I go in and there's something about the way that I put things together that I look at aspects without realising I'm doing it, and I'm picking up on things that need to happen that are critical to the business mission. So I guess that's that was my journey in terms of the corporate world. And then I left there to have my children. So I've stepped in and out of corporate to have my children. And whilst I was out on mat leave, particularly with my boys, as you mentioned, they were preemie, and so I needed to keep my mind occupied while I was caring for them while they were, doing their various medical appointments. So I started doing some voluntary work in the preemie space, and actually co-founded a preemie support group after restructuring one that was already there, and then I went back into corporate during the COVID time. After my boys were sort of old enough and gone back into school. And I found that, I'd left it sort of 10 years earlier, and I wasn't really quite, feeling a fit. I felt like I was, there's kind of a bit of a ceiling on what level of impact you can have in a corporate, unless you're in the sort of in the senior leadership, the executive leadership team. But I thought I'll give it another go, because I had done quite a bit of work in there, and a lot of transformational work, and always things that gave me a really good name and reputation within the business and allowed me opportunities to work in different spaces. So I thought I'd go back in, and it wasn't long before I realised, actually I've gone back into, and I need to go forward. And what is it that I want to do? And for me, it was about I've always had this idea of, building the dream or the vision of other organisations, and because I was able to, I've always thought, well, if I can bring these organisations out into the world and create organisations that are purposeful and meaningful, then that will take it out, and they'll expand in the universe, and they'll create a better environment in the world. So I thought, well, I'm going to go out on my own and do this, and actually put to work the stuff that I've been doing in corporates, but take it to that next level and create the vision of others.
I love that. And what a gift to be able to bring all that experience in to help leaders who are scaling and growing their businesses. When I think back to, my career, and when I was, started my own practice, and, various different times, one when I only had, 2 children, and then again when I had 4, if I'd had a mentor or a co-pilot or a deputy to help me scale, I could have just achieved so much more quickly, and without the hard lessons that I was learning along the way. So, many leaders, like I was then, intuitively know that you need a growth strategy, but feel very stuck. So from your experience, what are those common barriers that hold leaders back from stepping out and doing the growth piece?
I think, in my experience, what happens is they get stuck in the doing. They get stuck in they usually come to a business and grow a business from an experience, some sort of expertise that they've got, whether that's technical, whether that's a product related thing, whatever it is, and they've created that level of success from doing it themselves, and then they start to, they realise and can understand that there's a growth opportunity, but shifting from being that doer and creating the business yourself and allowing it to expand, knowing what to do and who to introduce in the business is where the challenge is. It's stopping, taking that time to reflect and going, okay, well, what is it that I want to achieve, and really connecting with what it is what that long-term strategy is. And so there's a piece here around separating themselves from the business, right? So in if you've been chugging along and you're growing the business and it's going well, you kind of become, or you are the business, and you haven't really given it a separate identity. So you really need to split that out and give the business its own identity if you want it to be sustainable. So you go, okay, well, here's who I am and here's who the business is. And once you give it that identity, it starts to create that clarity for you around, well, what does that business need in order to become to grow into that vision. And so it is that piece of firstly that separation, and then secondly, then taking the time to understand, well, what do I need to put in place to actually make that vision come to reality?
And that's a great segue into this next question that I'm really interested to understand more deeply. You talk about this growth puzzle, looking at the puzzle. And so how do you help business owners identify those key pieces and figure out what to prioritize once they've separated themselves from the business? How do you help them work out that puzzle?
Yeah. So the creating that compelling vision gives them a direction. It gives them something to aim for, and then it's really about looking at. So one of the things that's found, the foundational things, and one of them is around what's the culture? What is the culture that's going to match that or bring that vision to life? And then who. What does the ownership need to look like in terms of the business, right? So what you currently have a particular owner, it might require a different structure, and what you want to achieve in it and what your competitive advantage is will give you some ideas around what it is that you need to focus on. And once you've got that foundational sort of, here I am, this is what the culture is going to be, these are the people I need to put in place, then it's a matter of working out, well, what's the funding that I need? How am I going to fund this next phase of growth? And then looking at what are the processes, what are the organisational structures that need to be put in place, and these are sort of a foundational set of things that are needed. But once you do have that, that connection with a vision, then you can work out, well, what needs to happen in the business. So it's really about working with them, stepping back with them to understand what that looks like. And there are certain, I think because of my experience being able to, because I automatically start analysing, I walk into the business and I start analysing without even realising what I'm doing. I'm just looking around, and it's really about connecting the owner with what I'm looking at and making sure, checking in that is what they're experiencing and what they actually understand to be the things that, hey, if that works, that would be a really good thing, a really good outcome.
Yeah, it's such a wonderful opportunity for business owners. A wonderful opportunity for business owners to really get someone in that's got that the eyes and ears, almost to audit and do a discovery. So tell us, the big issue facing leaders is often a capacity issue. Being stretched too thin. What are the signs that you would suggest that leaders look out for when they're perhaps, before they reach that tipping point?
Yeah. Being caught in the everyday, not having time to think and reflect. So stepping back from that, from the everyday piece, feeling burnt out, feeling emotional about it. Also having a calendar booked, all the time, but not feeling like the team's performing. And then having a look at how your team are feeling and how people in the business feeling about, working there. What's the sort of vibe that you're getting around the business? But most frequently, it's a feeling of overwhelm in yourself that you're not not getting what you want out of it. You're not getting the most out of it. It's not really giving you the joy that you're expecting in the business.
Yeah, and you talked earlier on about structure and about resources and people. You know, how important is it to have the right people in the right roles? And, you know, how do we approach that, identifying, you know, who to put in roles and address those people issues? And this is definitely something from a businesswomen perspective that's bubbling up for me, is that, you know, understanding how to resource everything.
Yeah. So you're not always going to have the funds to resource according to what you need, you know. So you've got to having the right people in the right roles is critical, because you need to have the skills that you know, for that to deliver on those particular in your different functions. But the right people, I mean, part of it is defining what are the right people. And one of the things that the first thing you need to define is, you know, have they got the right attitude? You know, do they believe in your business and what you're out to deliver? That's one aspect of it. You know, the capability piece, you could probably, you know, that's another assessment depending on whether or not you have the capacity to train or upskill. But having the right attitude, and the attitude that sort of fits, that works with the culture that is part of the business, is really key in ensuring that you have the right people in the right roles. So I think in any business, you can get lost in the doing. And if you have the right people, they'll pull you out of that, and they'll give you the impetus to make shifts and changes as you need.
And how many CEOs do you think, you know, sort of extricating themselves almost from the day-to-day problems and don't have that empowered leadership team? I mean, it's that dance between, you know, being involved but not bogging it down, so that leaders don't feel like everything's on their own shoulders, right? So what would be your advice to leaders in that sort of dance?
You need to you do need to connect with your leadership team, with your executive leadership team, and I think in any in my experience, you do need to connect and make a regular. You've got to have a regular process and a discipline around the connection with your leadership team, so that you actually do feel like you have that oversight. It's not the same as being involved in the day-to-day. It's just about that connection and making sure that you're all on the same page, and making sure that the train is running in the same direction. It really is not. It's not about, you know, overdoing it. It's really just about checking in and, you know, having these. And I don't think when I first started, you know, really understanding, not started in my business, but started in corporate, because you do get little bits of strategy thrown at you and where the long-term vision is. And it really keeps you going when you feel lost in what you're doing. So understanding what your role is and what that meaning is, and having that connection with the people that are in charge of that process is still really important for the CEO as well. So you know, it isn't about taking over from the leadership team. It is about trusting them, but it also is about checking in and making sure that you're connected and on the same path.
And as a human sort of co-pilot, I mean, we were having a bit of a laugh about this idea of you being a co-pilot. I think when we were planning for this podcast, it's such a great idea that, you know, and it really does describe what you do, right? As this human co-pilot for your clients. But, you know, what does it really look like in practice, and how do you help these business owners or CEOs shift, you know, from that day-to-day into strategy and then back into implementation?
Yeah. There's a lot of it is around trust, and establishing trust with the clients, and it is about There's 3 levels of trust. They have to trust that you're going to look after them. They have to trust that you're going to look after their business, and they have to trust that you've got the ability to deliver on what you've promised that you would deliver on, and have the skills to do it. And what I do is I work on the relationship with the client, the CEO, and their leadership team. Our actual process is to have a regular meeting spaces. So we have a regular, we work to a quarterly and monthly meeting schedule. And on a monthly basis, I meet with the CEO, and on a quarterly, let me go back. So on a quarterly basis, we get together and we with the leadership team, and we work through what are the things that they need to achieve for that quarter. What are the absolute musts, and what would be the benefit of accelerating those deliverables? And then we agree to those, what we call rocks, to deliver the rocks of the business. So I act as a sort of an accountability partner for them. And then we then from there, we go out and we set the metrics around what needs to be delivered. And then I catch up on a monthly basis with the CEO. We talk through what's happening in their world, and more than just the business, in terms of what's happening personally, and then also what's happening in their world with the business. And then we separately, I then also meet with them and the leadership team, so they can hear what are the leaders saying, and that conversation is not really about the CEO walking in and telling them what to do. It's really about them hearing what's happening on the ground. And then in doing that, we do that review every quarter. So that's how it works. So it really is about it's not hand holding. It's really about partnering with them and understanding what their pain points are and what's going on in the business and how best to make that happen. And it's proved to be a successful way of operating.
Yeah, it's certainly very compelling, I think, for a business owner, because they've got the access to you on the team as a team member, walking that journey without having to have you on payroll. I mean, you'd be an extraordinary high-end salary earner if they were. So they're getting the best of you without having to pay the big bucks, so to speak, Sonya. I think it's a really compelling opportunity for businesses that need that deputy CEO and that advisory piece. And probably, I think, would have exceptionally powerful opportunity from a key man perspective as well, in terms of risk management, having someone at that strategic level that's there if there was a crisis. God forbid anything can happen. We've talked about the sorts of, fires that take up our times as managers, as CEOs, revenue issues, the constant issue around cash flow, firefighting when issues come up, when client issues or contracts or staff issues. Access to capital is a big theme that I'm hearing, with the work around the nation. How do you help your clients, those leaders, cut through the noise and be able to refocus on those long-term growth discussions when there is so much pressure going on the day-to-day? Yeah.
I mean, we always go back to what the long-term gain is. What do we want to achieve in the long term? So that's sort of the starting point, and stepping out of the fires and taking that time to pause and redirect the thinking. And then it's about looking at what's causing the noise, what's actually going on underneath the surface that's creating those blocks, because it's usually something more than, what we see at that surface level about funds or money or issues in the business. There's stuff going on underneath that's creating an environment of reaction. And the third part of it is looking at going from reaction to design. What do we need to look at immediately and work on? What do we need to redesign or plan for? And what do we need to stop doing? So that, you work out that balance and put them back on that keel. But and one of the things we all of us don't like to do is stop, because you feel like, particularly when you're caught up in it, you think the action of action actually is taking you to the next level, but it's not. All you're doing is creating an overload in your brain and not allowing the strategic piece to come in to the planning and to designing what needs to happen.
Oh, that's so true. You know, with having the advisory board and the work that we're doing at that advisory board level, and then having the marketing subcommittee or wanting all this analysis and stuff, you know, I was like pulling out my hair. I was saying to someone, oh my God, I've created a monster. I've got to do all this extra work. I'm so busy in delivering. And then I'm getting the results back from this analysis and providing that on to people and looking at it going, why haven't I done this before? It's so valuable, this data, this information. I'm already like starting to fine tune and tweak, and it's like pushing it. You know, it was almost like, it was great when we sort of set up, we're all sort of starting and looking, but having these advisors in your business who come from a different perspective, who haven't got that emotional attachment to your baby, is just, it's gold. It's a breath of fresh air. So anyone who's listening to this podcast, reach out to Sonya and, you know, see if she'll have even a half-hour video call and use her as a sounding board and get a feel for how you could work with someone like Sonya in your business. You know, we've got a big misunderstanding about what growth strategy is, isn't it, Sonya? I mean, you've often talked about, you know, in your experience, you know, that it is one of those misunderstood things. What do you think businesses are doing wrong when it comes to that growth strategy planning?
I think that, you know, one of the things that people or businesses do is think that bigger is better. You know, bigger is must have more and more markets, more this, more that. But sometimes it's about focusing and refocusing on what you've already got and getting that right. Because, you know, if you have you know, foundational issues or issues making noise in your business, then that's just going to get bigger. As it grows, it's going to get bigger if that foundational stuff isn't dealt with. The other part of it is just focusing on the revenue, you know, having a revenue, you know, increasing your revenue. But if you don't look at what your profitability is, what does that look like in terms of that bottom line, then that's also going to hit you. The other thing that businesses do is try and say yes to everything, you know, and you shouldn't. You need what you need to do is look at your vision and go, okay, well, what does actually fit with me, with our business? And it's actually about what you say no to that defines where you play, you know, and the other thing which I will go back to is really around, again, the foundational things around culture. Culture, you know, it's not an accident that people talk about culture eating strategy for breakfast. If your culture isn't aligned to your vision, it will stop you at some point in your tracks. And the other thing that I think
Absolutely.
Businesses sometimes don't do is look after the CEO. You know, leave the CEO alone to do it, to work it out, to work it through, and not give them the space or the, you know, to be able to talk it out, to hook into advice and mentoring and reflection over what needs to happen in the business.
Oh, you've hit the nail on the head there. So many CEOs and GMs, managing directors I speak to, just feel guilty if they're taking time out or if they're getting that coaching or that support that they need, because they've worked their way to the top, right? Yeah, and they're at the top thinking everyone's expecting me to know all the answers and to have, you know, to have a really clear idea about where we're going to go and how we're going to get there. And I'm an expensive resource in the organisation already. So more investment in me, they almost feel guilty about that. Yeah. They
do because, you know, as you said, you're the most expensive or one of the most expensive parts of the business, but your brain space is, you know, worth so much, you know, and I mean, there's, you know, when I first started, we didn't have a lot of this information. Now it's kind of commonplace to talk about the brain and lighting up different parts of the brain when and actually shifting, giving yourself that space to shift from one part of your brain thinking to the part that actually is responsible for strategy, and reflecting, giving yourself the space to actually, the reflection space is also around managing that overwhelm, the overwhelm that we can feel when everything is on our shoulders.
Absolutely. And look, you're talking about strategy, but you also help leaders, CEOs to create the actionable roadmap. I love the way when you talk about this roadmap and it's actionable. And that's sort of working with the CEO and the leadership team. And that comes in, I guess, to those quarterly kind of meetings that you're helping co-pilot. What does an actionable roadmap look like? How do you create that?
Well, we have to have, we do document things, and I have like quite a advanced or quite a complicated, not complicated, it's quite easy to look at, but it's quite a detailed document that has the metrics associated with delivering on different aspects of the strategy that we talk to. It's a frame, it's something that we put together and agree on during those quarterlies, and then we talk to it. And if it needs, that's the other thing that I meant to say, is that the growth strategy is not fixed. Right? It's not something that what people make the mistake of thinking is that you put something in place and that's it. It's like, but you don't. It's actually an iterative document, and you adjust it as you work through the process. So when we pull together those actions and agree to what that looks like, if something comes along, or an opportunity, or potentially a risk, or something, you do get these curveballs that come at businesses at times, and we can plan and adjust that, because you're keeping such a close eye on it that you've got time to react. So we're building in that sort of risk management piece as well, being able to react in a timely manner.
That sounds invaluable, really. Absolutely, from a risk management point of view, but also around that shared purpose and everyone understanding, what's important. And you talked about the rocks. What are the rocks, so that they don't get, at least those key things don't get forgotten. Obviously, You're highly relatable. I mean, we can see that in this podcast. I've got to know you, very well, and would love, be honoured, that I'd call you a friend, through working with you, because you are such a, relatable and humble person. You're not afraid of the hard conversations. So can you share some examples of how that relatability and that courage is important, and how it can make a real difference, perhaps in some experience that you've had with a client or a team?
Yep. So I on the other side of what I like to think is on the other side of a difficult conversation or a challenging conversation is the gold. So that's where, you need to, if you're hesitating in doing it, it's probably because you need to do it. And because once you get to the other side, then you get to a shared understanding about what needs to happen. And I was actually invited into a deal recently. An organisation was looking for funding, and these were they're in an industry where it's something that's currently on trend, and it would immediately be attractive if you put it together in the right way. So they were struggling to get funding, and I had a look at their investment memorandum, and I thought, this doesn't make sense. The way they're structured, this doesn't make sense. The amount they're asking for doesn't make sense, and what they're putting the money to use for is also not making sense to me. And then they had these conditions around the investors, which was essentially, you give me the money and then we'll just do what, we'll put our own management team in and do whatever. And I was like, well, this doesn't sort of, doesn't fly for me. And I thought, well, how do I have this conversation with these people because I could, for me, in my experience, seeking the funds they were looking for, it requires the same energy that seeking a larger amount would require. So I thought, well, there's no point in me going out and seeking something for you that's not actually going to work. And on top of which, I thought, well, if I don't question this, when I go out to people who are funders, they're going to question why I haven't questioned it. And so I went back to them and I and it really diplomatically said, please, can you explain, this funding, it just doesn't make sense to me. What are you thinking? And they were, adamant. They stuck to it. And I said, well, look, this is what I'm hearing. This is what I feel. This is a really great idea, but this is what I feel is necessary for you. You actually need something along this number, and then the use needs to be something like that. And then I sort of closed it off and said, look, I really would love to get this for you. I do feel, do believe in what you're doing. And at the end of it, they said, look, we were actually talked out of that money by the previous people we'd been talking to, and we actually thought that money was what we needed for this business. And so we immediately builds up my credibility with the business, because I've actually hit the nail on the head of something that they were thinking that they had been, because of fear and the fear of failure, that they decided that they were going to settle for something that wasn't going to work for them. So we found together that there was a road forward that was actually going to work for them, and that would deliver on what they were after. And if I hadn't had the conversation, I would have probably walked away from it,
Yeah, great example. And being able to foster that kind of safety inside teams as leaders and CEOs, where, the hard conversations can be had in those strategy rooms and in the action planning rooms, really does create a better outcome for all, because there's quite often information that someone might have, or a perspective that is unique, that needs to be heard. So having you there to guide these kind of cultural kind of developments inside a team would be enormously powerful for the future of the business. The qualities that you admire in leadership, tell us about sort of some of the qualities that you've seen to be great as leaders that you've worked with.
Yeah. I think you hit the nail on the head with the first one, which is connection. Connecting not just to the vision, but connecting to your people, and connecting to what makes them tick. And that's one of them. And the other one is being vulnerable, being able to turn up and on the days when things aren't working out, and actually say, hey, I'm in here with you. And the other one is being being trustworthy, but having integrity in the way that you operate. Walking the talk. If you're going to, one of the things I think is we post values on a wall a lot. Particularly in bigger organisations, we'll post the values, but how closely we live those values really makes a difference. People on the whole want to come to work and do want to have a meaningful role, whatever their role is in the business. They do want to do the right thing, and being true to those values and living those, and having them see them. And it doesn't appear, it can appear in all sorts of manners, and particularly when things are difficult. If things need to change, restructures are one of the things where things are changing for your people in the business, that can really destabilize teams, and can really destabilize the business if it's not managed properly. So, these are the times when those values come into it and really make a difference in how a business operates. But I think I'll also go back to the idea of, at the end of the day, we want to develop and create businesses that do more than just for the people that they're that they serve in the moment, because whatever we put, I'm a firm believer that whatever we put out there goes out into the universe. And what we want to do is create as many businesses as we can that can go out and be an antidote to some of the things that we experience in the world that, that doesn't serve. We've got astronomical levels of debt, we've got stress, we've got violence, we've got crime increasing, we've got there's all sorts of other issues that we've created, and we can be distant from that if we don't accept our responsibility in being, putting out there a different way of being and a different way of operating.
Well, that certainly is, a challenging and valuable, insight and a call to action for us as businesses. Do business, do good. I think that's a great little mantra there, Sonya, to raise today. For those of our leaders who are listening, and we stream across, we've got 20,000 followers across all our channels, and there's a lot of leaders that hook into our podcast show. What would be your advice to them around embracing and growing a growth mindset in line with the type of thinking that you've actually been explaining, which is a little bit different than what people think around a growth mindset? But what would be your advice to those listening?
I think take a step back into what you're telling yourself, what are the messages you're giving, what are the stories you're telling you, and think about, really pay attention to that and understand that you have you actually are the director of what goes on, what you tell yourself, because it's you that's doing that, right? So I think that shift starts from really examining where your head's sitting at the moment and what you are telling yourself. So reflection is one of the keys. And I think, for many years I've heard this and read this, about how important it is to be silent, to be in those silences, to be in the gap. I do encourage people to embrace that, because it really is where the gold is in moving your mindset forward. That's one thing. And the other thing is set some goals. As human beings, we like to chase outcomes, so if you've set some goals and you've got something to work toward, to actually think about, well, what path do I need to create in order to achieve those goals that I've set for myself.
Wonderful. I'm so hanging out for the Business Women Australia Leadership Retreat in Bali. So from the 7th to the 10th, that's exactly what I'm going to be doing. It's like reset, recharge, time out, warmth, and some goal setting for me. And I'm sure our other participants there, if anyone's listening and you're keen, it's not too late. We have a place available in Ubud in Bali from the 7th to the 10th of August. It's a great opportunity for leadership development, for that time to reset and focus on yourself. We believe that leadership starts with leading self first before leading others. And Sonya has just so beautifully and eloquently given us the reasons why in these 40 minutes that we've had together on our podcast. Sonya, how can people connect with you and EOX Business Partners? I mean, this is such an extraordinary opportunity to have a co-pilot work in your business. How can we find you?
You can find me on LinkedIn, you can find me on Facebook, and you can find me on Instagram, and also on our website, eoxbusinesspartners.com. So easily reachable, and also on the Business Women Australia member listing. We've already got that there as well, so they can connect via that as well.
And that's fantastic. Sonya, we're going to have to get you back on the show. You've raised so many important lessons and insights into what it can be possible around solving the growth puzzle. And for those of you who are listening and would love to be a member or to support the work of Business Women Australia, reach out to me, Lyn at businesswomenaustralia.com.au, or to Sonya, who's also, you'll find her on our team directory as a board member of Business Women Australia. Absolutely wonderful addition to the thinking and the strategy and the shaping of the future of Business Women Australia. So we would love to have more partners and members helping co-create what we're about, raising the profile and the visibility of women in leadership roles across business, and those with the mindset of leaders who are emerging leaders coming through the ranks. You don't have to be a business owner or an entrepreneur. You could be an executive, but we would love to have you in the community. Thank you so much, Sonya, for coming on the show.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. It's been lovely to chat and be in our Christmas colours.
I love it. Christmas in July, that's us. I'm ready to party. It's not raining in Mantra today, so I'm looking forward to maybe going out for lunch. My husband's coming back from being out on country at Eel River with the Yamatji Marlborough Aboriginal Corporation and all the community up there. So when he flies in, I think I might suggest a late, long lunch. What do you reckon?
That sounds really lovely. That sounds like a great way to spend Friday.
It does. Have a lovely weekend, everyone, and thanks for listening, and we'll see you at either one of our webinars or listen in and like and subscribe to the Business Women Australia podcast show.
Thank you.
You have been listening to the Business Women Australia podcast show. We hope you've enjoyed today's episode and gained some valuable insights to empower you on your journey. Don't forget to comment, like and subscribe to stay updated in our latest episodes. And if you're not already a member of Business Women Australia, what are you waiting for? Head to our website today and join so that you can connect with a thriving community of inspiring women across Australia. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll catch you in the next episode.